Good morning, everybody, and thank you, Adrian, for the welcome. And thank you to Dean Jeff and the team here for the very warm welcome and your great hospitality. This morning's session is going to focus very much on the issue of racism. And I'm very delighted to welcome my colleague Sharon, Robert, and Azariah to be our speakers this morning. A couple of thoughts from me before we sort of launch into their presentations. My own personal journey in terms of racism began in my land of birth, South Africa. A couple of anecdotal things from there and here. I've lived in this country now for 22 years. When I was appointed to my very first parish in South Africa in 1988, I made myself available to the bishop to work cross-culturally, and so I was sent off to St. Mary's parish in the city of Durban, a white church, and 2 or 3 weeks into my tenure at St. Mary's, as I was shaking hands, you know, the usual story, nice sermon, vicar, nice sermon, vicar. I was getting all of that, and then I was stopped. One of my parishioners came up to me and said to me, "Rogers, I'm sorry to have to tell you, but my husband and I are leaving St. Mary's to go to St. Martin's in the field in Durban North, a very nice, plush suburb." And I said, "Oh, that's rather sad." And I said, "You know, any particular reason for that?" And I can still see the scene in my mind. She said, "Well, I'm not prepared to worship in a church with a black vicar." And I said, "Well, God bless you, go well, and have a good time at St. Martin's." So that was my first brush with overt racism as a priest. And I can tell you numerous other sort of personal stories like that. When I came to England to be interviewed for my first parish job, I can tell you it was in the parish of West Didsbury. So there was this interview with the parish reps, and they questioned me about all sorts of things as parish reps do. And they said, "Do you have any questions for us?" And I'm not exactly shy to ask questions. So I said, "Do you have any people of color in the congregation?" I'd never visited the congregation before. The church warden said, "Yes, actually we do." And I said, "How many of them are involved in leadership in the parish?" And he looked at me rather sort of startled and said, "None." And then I asked, "Well, why not?" And this was more or less his answer. "Well, you know, Rogers, we never thought to ask them. We never thought to ask them." In a sense, in their awareness, the black folk, whom I eventually met when I started, I did take the job, obviously, and saw them all then, met them, wonderful people, but never ever were asked to join the PCC, be a lay minister, carry the cup, whatsoever. Black folk in that congregation who worship for yonks were invisible. And that's where I want to start my own introduction to the session today, to say the big issue with racism in society and the life of our church is very often that black people are invisible. Look around you, just turn your heads and look around each other, and please tell me how many black folk you see in this august assembly of cathedral reps today. And I'm not asking you to do that to make you feel bad. I really don't believe that. I believe that all of us here are people of good intent. We want to do the best for our church and for God and our cathedrals. And our cathedrals are at the forefront of Christian mission in this country, in the Church of England. And I'm proud of that. And I've been a dean now for cathedral for 17 years. And I know the lay of the land reasonably well. But brothers and sisters, a lot of the black folk in your congregation stroke communities. But remember, cathedral don't just serve our congregations. We serve our cities and villages and greater parts of our city. They seem to be a little bit invisible. And I'd like to say that when we gather again in 3 years' time for this conference, I hope we will do again, I'd like to see more black faces in this assembly. Otherwise, we're going to be wasting our time, spending time doing these sorts of sessions. It's a little bit like Jesus and his encounter with Nathanael in John's Gospel. Do you remember that story where Jesus goes up to Nathanael and says, behold, an Israelite in whom there is no guile. Do you remember that story? And Nathanael said, how do you know me? And Jesus said, I saw you when you stood under the tree. Jesus noticed him. He was not invisible to God. And I would want to extrapolate the same story to say that God recognizes each and every one of us, black and white. And that's very important, the whole issue of awareness. And I think the issue of racism is all about being more aware. And isn't awareness at the heart of our spirituality as Christians? To grow and to live in a greater sense of being aware of God's presence and being conscious that the Lord is with us. You don't need to invite the Lord is there already. He's here already. Black people are here already. Just be a bit more aware of us. Live a bit more consciously about us in your presence. I've just come back from a wedding in Germany, a personal story. My son Jonathan married his German fiancée. And what a glorious 2 weeks it has been for us as a family. It's great that my son and his wife did not allow their color, their different colors, their different cultures, and dare I say different nationalities to get in the way of their love and the union. For me, it warmed my heart that my own family, my own son, and was able to rise above all the tribalisms and the ethnicities that we get sort of bogged down by so very often in the church. So the issue of awareness and the importance of action, lament to action. So I'm hoping that we will get out of this morning's session. It's all about what are you going to do? What am I going to do when we get back to our cathedral communities about racism, addressing it, being courageous enough to do things, to be more inclusive. And dare I say, racism is not unconnected to all the other big issues, all the issues that we deal with in our life as a faith community. All things are connected. Homophobia, gender issues, domestic violence, exclusion of trans people, exclusion of black people, whoever you exclude, is all connected. Because justice is a major theme in the Bible. And justice is not just about racism or gender inequality, it's about every form of exclusion. And that's very important that we recognize that what we're dealing with today, tough as the subject will be, challenging as it will be, it is connected to all the other exclusions and discriminations that exist within us and in our life together. I have a vision of a Church of England, especially in our cathedrals. I have a vision to see our leadership at the local level of our cathedral life and our communal life to be one that is so reflective and diverse that it inspires the nation to greater things for God. Sadly, the Tory government is doing better than us at the moment, certainly in our cathedral life, and that should really challenge us at a very deep level. They got more diversity in their front bench than we have in our front bench. And I remember I said that I've been a dean of a cathedral now for 17 years. And you know what? This skin color is the only one as a dean in the Church of England. That should tell us a story. We are not moving fast enough. There have been some good progress made in the last few months since Lament to Action, with a few more UK ME bishops being appointed. Why were they not appointed before Lament to Action? You see, we've got to shout and we've got to protest and we've got to make a big noise for us to be heard in the life of the church. And that should not be the case. You know what really inspires me? That image in the book of Revelation, in the Sunday reading we had a few Sundays ago, where all these thousands were standing before the throne of God, and we are told that they were from every nation, from every tribe, and every language. Nobody's excluded from the glory of God's throne and in eternity. To use what Desmond Tutu used to say, my great hero said, you will be surprised when you get to heaven one day. God has a soft spot for sinners. I would like to say that you will be surprised when you get to heaven one day. You're going to find people like me in heaven too. What are you going to do about it? You can't say, oh dear Lord, I'm really not keen on these black people, they're going to take over the Church of England, and they're a bit of a nuisance with all their funny things they believe in and they do. We're all the same at the end of the day. All we want is to be recognized, for you to be aware of our presence, treat us with equality, with justice, with dignity, include us, allow us to be included in all walks of church life and community life. And most importantly, let that lead to transformation so that we as cathedrals in this country have an incredible vision and an amazing picture and image of inclusivity to offer to the people of England and beyond. That's when the gospel will really be the gospel. So I hope you will be inspired by the talks, the addresses from my two brothers and sister here. I've worked with them in various guises. Robert has probably forgotten. He's come to Manchester Cathedral some years ago during the anniversary of the ending of the slave trade. So we met then, and Sharon and Azariah, both colleagues I've worked with. So it's good to welcome you again. Sharon is going to address us first for about 25 minutes. And I promise you, after the 25 minutes, you will have a chance to stand up and stretch a little bit. I've been one of the victims sat there like you for the last days. And I tell you, it's been hell just sitting there through talk after talk after talk. So I'm going to make sure that we get a bit of a break after Sharon's talk, followed by Robert. Sharon is a senior tutor at St. Mellitus, and she's a great colleague. So Sharon, the floor is yours. Thanks very much indeed.